So, what if I told you that being slightly less terrible at your weaknesses is actually like the fastest way to completely ruin your career?
I mean, it definitely sounds harsh when you put it like that.
Right. Or that the specific skills you just spent, I don't know, 4 years and $100,000 acquiring are intrinsically speaking anyway completely worthless.
Yeah, that's the one that really gets people defensive.
Oh, absolutely. But we are actually going to look at the math today. Because if you log on to social media right now, or you open a business magazine, it is incredibly easy to feel this deep, gnawing anxiety.
Oh, yeah. The comparison trap is real.
It is. You see this endless parade of massive salaries, flashy C-suite titles, and these like seemingly overnight success stories. And the natural instinct, the completely human evolutionary reaction is to think, I need to get there.
Right. I need that status, I need that money, and I need it right now.
Exactly. Yeah. But what we're looking at today argues that the vast majority of people are building their lives and their careers completely backward.
They really are. They're chasing the shiny stuff first.
Yeah, they're chasing the resources and the reputation while just, like, completely ignoring the foundation. To use a mechanical analogy, it's like they're slapping a Ferrari body kit onto a lawnmower engine.
That is the perfect visual.
Right. It looks incredible. Sitting in the driveway, you can take photos of it for Instagram. But the absolute second you try to take it on the highway, the entire thing just shakes itself to pieces.
Exactly. Just can't handle the friction.
So today we're taking a deep dive into the fundamental, enduring laws of success. We're pulling this from Stephen Bartlett's book, The Diary of a CEO, The 33 Laws of Business and Life.
And it is such a dense, powerful resource.
It really is. And the mission here for you listening is simple. We want to give you a shortcut to the underlying mechanisms of human potential.
Yeah, we're bypassing the fleeting business tactics.
Right, the seasonal marketing hacks that, stop working the moment and algorithm changes. And instead, we're extracting the core psychological realities that dictate why certain people actually win over the long term. Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, the emphasis on long-term mechanisms over short-term tactics is, like, crucial here. I mean, strategy changes constantly, but human psychology is incredibly static.
Yeah, the hardware hasn't really changed in 10,000 years.
Right. So the goal of this exploration is to look at the unseen architecture of value. We want to unpack why certain individuals just seem to effortlessly command attention and loyalty.
While others, hustle themselves to the point of total burnout, only to watch everything collapse the moment the market shifts.
Exactly. And what makes this material so compelling isn't just that it observes what successful people do. It breaks down the sequential psychological order of how they actually build their capacity to execute.
Sequential being the key word there.
Yeah. We're going to explore the strict chronological rules of human potential and the counterintuitive ways the brain acquires new skills. Plus, that deeply uncomfortable reality about why your current expertise might be trapped in a context that is severely limiting its value.
Let's start right at the foundation then. Because before we can talk about leading a team or finding a lucrative industry, we have to understand the architecture of our own capacity.
Right. Which brings us to the 5 buckets framework.
Yeah, and I love this visual because it takes something incredibly abstract like your career trajectory and gives it a really rigid physical dimension. So unpack the mechanics of this framework for us. What are we actually looking at here?
Okay, so imagine you have 5 physical buckets sitting in a row in front of you. They represent the totality of your professional and personal value.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
The first bucket is knowledge. This is your theoretical understanding of the world. It's just simply what you know.
Makes sense.
The second bucket is skills. This is your ability to execute. It's the practical, physical, or strategic application of that knowledge.
Got it. So bucket 1 is knowing it, bucket 2 is doing it.
Exactly. Now, the third bucket is your network. This is who you know, the actual web of human relationships you've built.
Okay.
The fourth bucket is resources. This is what you possess. So it could be capital, assets, proprietary tools, intellectual property.
The tangible stuff.
Right. And the fifth and final bucket is your reputation. This is what the world believes about you. It's your public trust.
Okay, so knowledge, skills, network, resources, reputation.
Exactly. But identifying those 5 elements isn't particularly revolutionary on its own, right? The absolute critical insight, like the law that governs this entire concept, is the required sequence.
The sequence.
Yes. These buckets must be filled in order, strictly from left to right. Left to right. Okay, so what happens if I try to mix that up? Say I focus heavily on knowledge, like I read 100 books a year and I focus heavily on building my network. But I completely skip the skills bucket. I just, go to networking events and talk about the books I read.
If you do that, you become what is essentially a hollow connector.
A hollow connector. Ouch.
Right. I mean, you have theoretical knowledge and you know people, but because you lack that second bucket, the ability to actually apply the knowledge to solve a real-world problem, you offer no tangible value to that network.
You're just a nice person to have coffee with.
Exactly. But no one is going to partner with you or invest in you or hire you based on just having coffee.
That makes total sense.
The sequence is dictated by causality. You cannot sustainably build the later buckets without the earlier ones acting as the engine.
Because the earlier ones literally generate the later ones.
Precisely. Think about a robust career flow.
Yeah.
We usually start our professional lives acquiring knowledge. We study, we observe, we take entry-level roles.
When we take that theoretical knowledge and repeatedly apply it under pressure in the real world, the friction of that application crystallizes the knowledge into a skill.
And once you possess deep knowledge and highly refined skills, you inherently become professionally valuable.
Yes. And because you are valuable, people naturally want to collaborate with you. That is how a genuine network grows. It's not built by handing out business cards.
It's built by being useful.
Exactly. It's built by being incredibly useful. And once you have those first three, knowledge, skills, and a powerful network, that triad exponentially expands your access to the fourth bucket, resources.
Because now people are willing to fund your ideas.
Right. They pay you premium salaries or give you access to their assets. And finally, when you have a track record built on the first four buckets, you inevitably earn a robust, unshakable reputation.
The logic is airtight, but logic rarely dictates how we actually manage our careers.
Oh, no, definitely not.
Our ego dictates a massive portion of our behavior. And the psychological reality is that nobody wants to spend a decade quietly filling the knowledge and skills buckets in total obscurity.
No, we crave the dopamine hit of the later buckets.
Yes. We want the C-suite title, the massive paycheck, the verified check mark next to our name online. We want the resources and the reputation immediately without the friction of the foundation.
Well, the ego's primary function is to seek status and protect our self-image. And it's remarkably persuasive. It constantly tempts us to believe we're, like, the exception to the rule.
I don't need to put the work in. I'm just naturally gifted.
Right. But when you analyze the individuals who actually reshape industries, the ones who command almost magical levels of influence, they are universally people who have spent years, sometimes decades, obsessively pouring every ounce of their energy into those first two buckets.
There's a fantastic illustration of this in the material involving Elon Musk.
Yes, the jogging story.
The visual on this is just perfect. So the author's friend is sitting in his front garden in the morning, having an espresso. And Elon Musk comes jogging towards him.
Just out of nowhere.
Right. And he's sweaty. He's wearing tired, ratty gym clothes. He's out of breath. He stops to chat, cracks a weird joke, laughs at it himself, and then casually starts rambling about his plans to build a spaceship, put microchips into the brains of monkeys, and create AI-powered house robots.
No one does.
Right. And then he just waves and jogs away.
It's amazing. Let's analyze the psychology of that interaction. If literally anyone else on the planet in sweaty gym clothes jogged up to you and casually laid out that agenda,
you'd assume they were suffering from a severe psychotic break.
Exactly. You'd slowly back away and maybe call for help. But because it is Elon Musk, suddenly all of those absurd, borderline science fiction ambitions are treated as inevitable realities.
Because he said it.
Right. But why? It's not because the ideas themselves are any less bizarre. It's entirely because his 5 buckets are filled to the absolute brim.
He's put the time in.
Yes. He has spent his entire life obsessively acquiring physics, engineering, and business knowledge. He applied that knowledge through years of agonizing friction to build world-changing skills.
Which built the network.
Exactly. Which attracted immense resources, which forged a reputation that is virtually unparalleled in the tech sector. Because those foundational buckets are overflowing, people don't just tolerate his absurd ideas, they actively beg to be a part of them.
Right. Investors just blindly throw billions of dollars of their clients' money at him.
And top-tier engineers quit safe, lucrative jobs at Apple and Google, uproot their families, and move across the country just for the chance to work grueling hours for him. The fullness of the foundation makes the absurd believable.
The fullness of the foundation makes the absurd believable. I love that phrase.
Yeah.
But let's look at the flip side of this, because I think the negative example is, frankly, a lot more relatable for the average person listening.
Oh, for sure.
There's the story of a guy named Richard. And Richard represents exactly what happens when you let your ego convince you to skip the line.
Richard is the quintessential cautionary tale of the modern career. So he was a 21-year-old employee working at the author's marketing company in Manchester.
Okay.
And he was genuinely talented. He was flourishing in his role, slowly but steadily filling his knowledge and skill buckets. But then he walks into the office one day and announces he's resigning.
Plot twist.
Right. He had been offered a job as the CEO of a brand new marketing startup based in New York City. The offer included double his current salary, a massive equity package, and the immense social glamour of moving from a relatively quiet city in England to the center of Manhattan.
It is the ultimate ego trap. It's the Ferrari body kit. I mean, he's 21 years old. He has zero actual management experience.
No.
He's never run a P&L. He's never had to fire anyone. His foundational buckets of knowledge and skills are only just starting to gather a few drops at the bottom.
Right.
But the market randomly offers him the ultimate resource and reputation buckets. CEO title, double pay, NYC lifestyle. He's 21. How do you say no to that?
You don't. The temptation is just too great. So he took the job. But the immutable law of the 5 buckets is that there is simply no skipping the sequence if you are playing for long-term sustainable outcomes.
You can't cheat the architecture.
Exactly. You cannot cheat the architecture of human potential. When you accept a role that requires full skill and knowledge buckets and yours are empty, the pressure of the job will instantly expose the structural weakness.
It's going to crack immediately.
And it did. Within 18 months, that once promising company Richard joined completely collapsed.
Wow.
Think about the mechanics of that collapse for a 21-year-old CEO. Because he lacked the skills to manage complex team dynamics, his key employees likely lost faith and quit. Because he lacked the knowledge of advanced cash flow management, the company bled money.
And then it all unravels.
Right. The company got shrouded in controversy, ran out of capital, and folded. Richard found himself unemployed, living in one of the most expensive cities on Earth, completely isolated from his original network, and having to swallow his pride to search for a new entry-level junior role in the exact same industry he had just tried to conquer.
He essentially had to respawn at level 1 because he skipped the tutorial.
That's exactly it.
It's like putting up a massive, beautiful skyscraper on a literal swamp. It looks incredible for the first few months. You invite your friends over, you post pictures of the lobby online, but the foundation is soft.
Because you haven't taken the time to drive the steel pylons of knowledge and skill deep down into the bedrock.
Right. So the moment the weather changes, the moment real market pressure is applied, the ground shifts and the whole thing sinks.
Yeah.
But I actually want to push back on this premise slightly. What happens when the ground shifts? But it has absolutely nothing to do with your ego or your bad decisions.
What do you mean?
Let's say you do everything perfectly. You ignore the shiny distractions, you painstakingly fill the buckets in order, you build a solid bedrock foundation. But disaster strikes anyway. Like entire industries get disrupted by new technology, or a global pandemic shuts down the economy, or you just get laid off due to a corporate merger.
Right. The things outside your control. The framework accounts for this entirely. It introduces a concept called the professional earthquake.
A professional earthquake.
Yes. It's a violent, unpredictable career event that completely blindsides you. Like you mentioned, it could be a macroeconomic recession, or, highly relevant today, a massive technological paradigm shift, like generative AI suddenly wiping out entire categories of knowledge work.
Which is terrifying a lot of people right now.
Absolutely. Or it could simply be getting ousted from a company you spent a decade building. When a professional earthquake hits, the destruction to your outer buckets is catastrophic.
Right.
It can completely drain your 4th bucket, your resources. Your savings might evaporate, your equity becomes worthless, your income drops to 0. It can severely fracture your 3rd bucket, your network.
Because when you lose your power, you find out who your real friends are.
Exactly. You quickly discover how many people in your network were only there for the utility you provided. And it can even severely damage your 5th bucket, your reputation, through no fault of your own.
Which is just a terrifying reality to sit with. To realize that you could spend 15 years building resources, network, and reputation, and literally lose it all on a random Tuesday.
It is deeply unsettling. But this actually brings us to the most empowering insight of the entire bucket framework.
Okay, lay it on me.
No professional earthquake, no matter how severe or unprecedented, can ever empty your first 2 buckets.
Oh, wow. Right.
A stock market crash cannot go into your brain and remove your knowledge. A disruptive AI technology cannot force your nervous system to unlearn your hard-won physical or strategic skills.
They're completely untouchable.
Those first two buckets are genuinely earthquake-proof.
Hmm.
They represent your intrinsic longevity. If you have those two buckets completely full, you can always rebuild the other three.
Because you have the blueprint.
Exactly. And you'll rebuild them vastly faster the second time around. True prosperity isn't the capital you hoard in the resource bucket. True prosperity is the dense concentration of what you know and what you can execute.
That reframes the entire concept of job security. It means that an investment in your own knowledge and skills is actually the only true hedge against volatility.
It's the only real safety net.
It also completely changes how you should evaluate career choices. Like if you're sitting there weighing two job offers and one pays, say, 20% more cash, but the other offers significantly more mentorship, harder challenges, and opportunities to acquire rare skills.
Right.
The one with more cash is actually the lower paying job in the long run. By taking the cash, you're trading permanent, earthquake-proof foundation for highly fragile temporary resources.
That is the exact mathematical reality. You're sacrificing the only assets that guarantee your resilience in the face of inevitable market chaos.
Okay, so let's play this out. I buy into the framework. I recognize that knowledge and skills are my only true permanent assets.
Good.
But the glaring problem I face now is time. If I'm starting from scratch or, pivoting to a new industry, slowly dripping information into these buckets over decades sounds agonizing.
It does.
So how do we speed run this? How do we accelerate the acquisition of knowledge and skills so we aren't just passively consuming information?
There is a psychological mechanism for this, which brings us to one of the most powerful concepts we're covering today: creating a public obligation to teach.
Okay, this is fascinating.
It represents a massive paradigm shift in how we approach education and mastery. Traditionally, we view learning as a highly passive, highly private consumption of data.
Right. You read a textbook in your room, you watch a documentary, you sit in a lecture hall and take notes.
Exactly. But there's a profound quote highlighted here from the late spiritual leader Yogi Bhajan. He articulated a much deeper, more aggressive mechanism for acquiring expertise.
What did he say?
He said, if you want to learn something, read about it. If you want to understand something, write about it. If you want to master something, teach it.
If you want to master something, teach it. The phrasing is elegant, but the psychology operating beneath the surface of that statement is incredibly dense.
Oh, it's intense.
We aren't just talking about the physical act of explaining a concept. We're talking about engineering a high-stakes environment. We're talking about what is often referred to as skin in the game.
Precisely. Skin in the game is the psychological engine that drives accelerated learning. Let's look at the mechanics of private consumption.
Okay.
When you read a book privately, the stakes are absolute zero. If you don't fully grasp a complex chapter, or if your mind wanders, or if you completely forget the core premise by the next morning, what happens?
Nothing. Nobody knows.
Right. There are zero consequences. Your brain knows this, so it doesn't allocate maximum metabolic resources to storing that information.
It's just casually browsing.
But the moment you create a public obligation to teach that information, when you tell an audience, whether it's 5 friends or 50,000 followers, that you are going to explain a concept to them, you introduce a binding social contract.
You put your own social currency, your reputation on the line.
Yes. And this leverages a massively powerful evolutionary quirk in the human brain called loss aversion.
Explain the mechanics of loss aversion,
Sure.
because it's not just a business term, it's a deeply biological, right?
It is. Loss aversion is a well-documented cognitive bias, deeply rooted in our evolutionary survival mechanisms. It dictates that the psychological pain of losing something is roughly twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining something of equal value.
Twice as powerful. Wow.
Yeah, from an evolutionary standpoint, this makes sense. For our ancestors, finding an extra meal was great, it was a gain, but losing your only meal meant death. So our nervous systems evolved to be hyper-vigilant against loss. In the modern world, this translates to social standing. The pain of losing $100 feels worse than the joy of finding $100.
So how does that tie back to teaching?
When you make a public commitment to teach, you suddenly manufacture something to lose. Your credibility, the trust of your peers, your self-image as a competent person.
You're putting it all at risk.
Exactly. That fear of public failure, that intense psychological friction, forces your brain into a state of heightened neuroplasticity. It engages with the material on a vastly deeper, more critical level because it is preparing to defend that knowledge in front of the tribe.
There was a brilliant personal anecdote about this in the source material. At 21 years old, long before building massive companies, the author made a grueling promise to themselves and to their tiny online audience at the time.
I love this story.
They committed that every single day, at exactly 7 p.m., they would write a tweet or make a short video delivering a single highly synthesized new idea and post it at 8 p.m. without fail. Yeah. Every single day.
Think about the immense daily pressure of that self-imposed obligation. Every single day, you wake up knowing the clock is ticking towards 7 p.m.
You can't just coast.
No, it forces you to spend your entire day actively hunting for new knowledge. You pay vastly closer attention during conversations, you read articles with a critical eye, you analyze human behavior.
And more importantly, you are forced to synthesize that knowledge.
Right. You cannot get away with a vague, fuzzy understanding of a concept if you have to clearly articulate it to a highly critical public audience an hour later. You have to strip away the jargon and find the core truth.
So by executing that daily public obligation over almost a decade, they eventually grew an audience of nearly 10 million followers.
But here's the critical takeaway. The 10 million followers were just a byproduct.
Really?
Yes. The true value was the forced, hyper-accelerated mastery of their own knowledge and skill buckets. The audience was just the accountability mechanism.
It makes me think of calling your shot in a game of pool, but doing it in front of a massive stadium.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Like, if you're just playing a casual game of pool alone in your basement, you line up a tricky shot, you miss, you shrug, you pull the ball out of the pocket and try again. Your heart rate never changes.
There's no pressure.
Right. But if you stand up in a stadium with 50,000 people watching, point your cue stick and say 8-ball, corner pocket, your biology physically alters.
Your heart rate spikes. Your pupils dilate.
Exactly. Your focus narrows exclusively to the geometry of the table. Adrenaline floods your system. Once you say it out loud in public, you have to execute. Your brain marshals cognitive and physical resources it simply would not bother deploying if you were alone in the basement.
The stadium forces the focus. And what is truly revolutionary about the era we live in right now is that the barriers to building that stadium have dropped to absolute zero.
Oh, totally. With AI and social media.
Yeah, we have ubiquitous social media platforms. We have AI tools to help structure our thoughts. We have newsletter platforms. Anyone, anywhere can instantly manufacture a public audience and become a creator, a teacher, or an educator.
So how does the listener actually weaponize this today? If I'm listening to this on my commute, how do I apply loss aversion to my own goals?
There are some highly practical applications here.
Okay, let's hear them.
If you want to deeply understand how a specific publicly traded company operates, don't just idly read their Wikipedia page. Take a portion of your savings and buy their stock.
Put financial skin in the game.
Exactly. Suddenly, you will read their quarterly earnings reports with intense scrutiny. Or, if you want to understand the mechanics of Web 3.0 or blockchain technology, don't just listen to a podcast about it.
Right. Go through the painful, complicated process of setting up a wallet and buying an NFT.
Yes. And if you simply want to get into shape, don't quietly buy a gym membership that you can secretly abandon in 3 weeks.
Because you will abandon it.
We all do. Instead, create a WhatsApp group with 5 brutally honest friends and mandate that every single person must share a sweaty selfie or a screenshot of their Apple Watch workout data every single day. Or they have to pay a fine.
Push your social currency and your pride on the line.
By doing that, you are artificially manufacturing the stakes. You are hacking your own evolutionary biology, turning your deep-seated fear of social loss into an engine that guarantees your consistency. It is unequivocally the fastest way to fill the knowledge and skill buckets.
All right, so let's follow the logical progression here. You've hacked your loss aversion. You've built this public obligation. Your buckets are rapidly filling up. You have acquired deep, specialized skills. You are a master.
Sounds great, right?
It sounds like the end of the journey. But here is where we hit a massive, incredibly uncomfortable roadblock. Where do you actually deploy these skills?
Ah, yes.
Because there is a bombshell revelation we need to address from the book.
Yeah.
Intrinsically speaking, the skills you just bled to acquire are completely mathematically worthless.
It is a deeply provocative statement, and it usually triggers an immediate defensive reaction.
I can feel myself getting defensive just saying it.
Right. Because we spend our entire lives, from primary school through higher education, being told that acquiring skills equates to acquiring intrinsic human value. We are taught that if you have a skill, you possess worth.
That's the whole point of going to college.
Exactly. But the economic reality is entirely different. A skill, in a vacuum, possesses zero inherent value.
Zero.
Zero. The financial and social value of your skill is 100% determined by two external variable factors: the context in which that skill is deployed and the perceived rarity of that skill within that specific context.
I can hear people yelling at their speakers right now. What do you mean my skills are worthless? I can write incredibly well. I can code. But the value is literally just what the market in a specific room is willing to pay for it.
Exactly. Let's look at the tangible math of this. Take the core skill of writing, the ability to research complex information, synthesize it logically, and communicate it clearly.
A great skill to have.
Right. A highly proficient writer working in the traditional print media or magazine publishing industry might earn a very modest salary, perhaps struggling to make ends meet. Now take that exact same human being with the exact same core ability to synthesize and write and drop them into the medical technology or biotech sector as a technical medical writer.
Their salary immediately triples or quadruples.
Yes. The core neural pathway, the actual skill they are executing, has not changed one iota. The only variable that changed was the context.
The room they walked into.
Exactly. Think about a data analyst examining historical trends in academia. They make a fraction of what a data analyst examining high-frequency trading algorithms in a hedge fund makes.
Or an AI software developer commanding a staggering premium over a traditional front-end web developer, even if they share underlying programming logic.
Why? Because the context is higher stakes, the outcomes have massive financial leverage, and crucially, the skill appears significantly rarer in that specific environment.
There is a phenomenal personal story about this in the source that really drives the point home.
The biotech story.
Yes. So the author reached a point of deep burnout in their career. They were the CEO of a highly successful social media marketing agency, but they were exhausted from marketing consumer goods.
Right, they were spending their days trying to convince people to buy slightly different dresses, t-shirts, and fashion accessories.
Yeah, they wanted out. But instead of abandoning their skills, they simply changed the context. They took their highly refined social media marketing skills and applied them to a completely alien landscape, the biotech sector.
Which is brilliant.
They began advising a biotech company that was teetering on the edge of a massive multi-billion-dollar initial public offering.
And this is where the magic of perceived rarity occurs.
Okay, explain that.
Well, in the fast-paced world of consumer fashion, the author's social media skills, while excellent, were not rare. Every fashion brand on Earth employs a small army of social media experts. The perceived rarity was incredibly low, and the financial leverage, the upside of selling a few thousand extra t-shirts, was relatively small.
Makes sense.
But when they stepped into the highly regulated, deeply technical, scientifically rigid world of biotech, high-level, modern digital marketing skills were practically non-existent.
They were basically a unicorn.
Exactly. In that context, those skills were incredibly rare. Furthermore, because this company was preparing for a multi-billion-dollar IPO, the leverage of controlling the public narrative was astronomical.
The stakes were huge.
Huge. By applying the exact same strategic thinking they used to sell clothes, they generated an $8 million return for their advice in the biotech space.
$8 million.
The exact same intellectual calories were burned, but the context multiplied the value exponentially.
The exact same skill, yielding an $8 million return simply by walking into a different room. That completely shatters how most of us approach our careers.
It really does.
We think, I need to get better at my job, when in reality, we should be thinking, I need to take my current ability and find a room where it is considered a superpower. This ties perfectly into a quote from the comedian Jimmy Carr that gets brought up, which I found hilarious, but also deeply incisive regarding our educational system. Jimmy Carr points out that school teaches us the exact wrong lesson about human value.
The all-rounder myth.
Right. School trains us to be mediocre all-rounders. If you're a student and you get a D in physics but an A in English, the school's immediate reaction is, stop focusing on English. We need to pull you out of creative writing and tutor you in physics until you can scrape by with a C.
Which is just so backwards.
Jimmy Carr's brilliant point is, the real world does not need someone who is slightly less terrible at physics. The real world disproportionately rewards people who lean heavily, almost obsessively, into their natural extreme abilities.
This is a profound critique of the industrial education model. It was fundamentally designed to produce standardized, compliant competence for factory work rather than exceptional, specialized mastery. The market economy does not reward well-rounded all-rounders. It brutally ignores average and heavily rewards specialized excellence.
Let me stop you there and challenge this deeply, because this flies in the face of a massive self-improvement industry.
Go for it.
Every single corporate performance review I have ever sat through, every HR seminar, always features a section on identifying your weaknesses and closing the gap.
Hmm?
Are you telling me that the traditional corporate advice to work on your weaknesses is a complete waste of time?
Based on the mechanics of extreme success, yes, it is wildly inefficient advice.
Really? Just completely ignore them?
Think about the mathematical return on your time. If you possess a natural deficit in a specific area, say complex logistical operations, and you spend 10,000 agonizing hours trying to fix that weakness, what is the best possible outcome?
You get slightly better.
Congratulations, you have elevated yourself from terrible to completely average. You have achieved mediocrity. But the market does not pay a premium for average operations managers.
Wow. Okay, when you put it like that,
The framework argues that you must abandon the hope of becoming an expert in the things you are naturally bad at and find zero joy in doing. True, outsized success comes from leaning entirely into your natural asymmetrical strengths and aggressively delegating everything else.
so you just outsource the stuff you're bad at.
Exactly. We tend to overstate our own importance, believing we must be the hero who does it all. But building a business or a successful department is ultimately just a massive recruitment exercise. It is the art of finding individuals whose natural obsessive strengths perfectly overlap with your natural weaknesses.
So if you're a visionary who is terrible at details,
Do not spend 5 years trying to become a mediocre accountant. Hire a brilliant, detail-obsessed accountant who loves spreadsheets as much as you love ideas. When you assemble the right complementary pieces, the synergy becomes nonlinear. In a perfectly recruited team, 1 plus 1 does not equal 2, 1 plus 1 equals 3 or 5 or 10.
okay, so let's summarize where we are. We have filled the foundational buckets. We have hacked our psychology to learn rapidly. We have found the high-leverage context where our specific skills are rare, and we've leaned entirely into our strengths while delegating our weaknesses.
A very strong position to be in.
We have the perfect setup. But here's the next inevitable problem. Capitalism is fiercely competitive. If you find a highly lucrative context, other smart people are going to see it, and they are going to flood into your room.
Absolutely inevitable.
So how do you actually stay ahead? How do you innovate when everyone is trying to copy you? The framework argues that, ironically, the secret to staying at the top is that you must lose more often than your competitors. Let me say that again. To win, you must outfail everyone else.
This is where the framework becomes deeply counterintuitive, and it directly contradicts the operational behavior of almost every large corporation on Earth.
Because large corporations hate failing.
Right, but the law is stark. You must outfail the competition. To understand why, we look at Thomas J. Watson, the legendary former president of IBM, who architected the company's monumental dominance in the 20th century.
He had a very specific philosophy, right?
He did. He had a core philosophy regarding innovation that was stunningly simple but incredibly hard to execute. He said, if you want to increase your success rate, double your failure rate.
There is an amazing historical anecdote about Watson that perfectly illustrates this. It's the story of the $600,000 mistake.
Classic story.
So a mid-level executive at IBM made a massive strategic error that ended up costing the company $600,000, which in the mid-20th century was an absolutely staggering astronomical amount of money.
It could have ended his life, basically.
Right. So the executive gets called into Watson's office. He walks in, fully expecting to be terminated on the spot. He literally hands Watson his resignation letter.
Which you would do.
Yeah. And Watson looks at him, refuses the letter, and says, "Fire you. I just spent $600,000 training you. Why would I want somebody else to hire your experience?"
It is a masterful, almost shocking reframe of what failure actually is. Watson instinctively understood the hidden mechanics of progress. He realized that failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is the mandatory data collection phase of success.
The mandatory data collection phase.
Yeah.
I like that. It is the friction required to generate heat. Let's trace the logic. Failure produces raw feedback. Feedback, when analyzed objectively, crystallizes into new knowledge. And knowledge in a competitive market is power.
So failure equals power.
Therefore, high-speed failure is the direct engine of power. If you or your organization are not failing regularly, it means you are only operating within the safe boundaries of what is already known. You are not exploring the edges of what is possible. You are coasting, and coasting is just the precursor to irrelevance. But if failure is the literal mechanism of progress, why do we fight it tooth and nail? Why are massive, multi-billion-dollar organizations intentionally designed to eliminate failure at all costs?
The primary culprit, which the framework highlights through the shared frustrations of elite CEOs, is bureaucracy.
Bureaucracy, the dreaded word.
Yes, bureaucracy is the physical, organizational manifestation of the fear of failure. Look at how top leaders describe it. The CEO of Walmart openly refers to bureaucracy as a villain.
Wow.
Charlie Munger, the legendary investor, stated that its tentacles should be treated like a cancer. Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan Chase calls it a disease.
Why such harsh language, though?
Because corporate bureaucracy, with its endless compliance rules, its 7 layers of sign-off, its committees to review the committees exists for one reason: to minimize risk. It is a survival instinct for middle management.
Nobody wants to be the one who signs off on the $600,000 mistake.
Exactly.
Right.
But in minimizing risk, it fatally chokes the speed of execution. It drastically slows down the failure rate. And if you slow down a failure rate, you fundamentally cripple the learning rate.
The story of the family e-commerce empire in the book illustrates the catastrophic danger of bureaucracy perfectly. It's a literal battle of speed between a father and a son.
It is one of the most revealing case studies in the material. The author served as an advisor for a massive, multi-billion-dollar food and nutrition e-commerce conglomerate for 6 years.
Okay.
The group was deeply divided into 2 distinct brands. The legacy brand, the cash cow, was run by the father, the original founder. The newer experimental brand was run by his son. The author had a front row seat to watch the son's brand absolutely explode in growth.
Like completely overtake the father's brand.
Completely. It transformed from a small, unprofitable side venture into a billion-dollar juggernaut that entirely eclipsed the father's legacy brand in relevance and revenue.
And what was the defining reason for that? Was the son just smarter?
No, it wasn't that the son was intrinsically smarter. It was that the son had engineered a failure rate that exceeded his father's by a factor of 10.
Right. The author gives a specific example of how this played out in real time. They would discover a new technological breakthrough, say, a highly experimental new algorithm to scale social media acquisition.
Right.
They would bring this exact same strategy to both the father and the son on the exact same day. The father's legacy team would listen politely, immediately scoff at the perceived risk, complain about the consulting fee, demand a more comprehensive slide deck, and require multiple layers of committee sign-off.
Because they're terrified of risk.
Exactly. 9 months later, the author would check in, and the father's team would still be discussing the strategy internally. They were terrified of making a misstep. Meanwhile, the son's team would hear the idea, immediately greenlight a small test budget, break things, fail on the first 3 attempts, learn the nuances of the algorithm, optimize it, and scale it massively.
All while the father's team is still scheduling meetings.
Yes. By the time the father's team had scheduled their 4th committee meeting to discuss the risks, the son had already extracted millions of dollars in value from the strategy. The father's bureaucracy, his desperate desire to prevent any mistake, was the exact mechanism that guaranteed his brand's irrelevance.
And we have to understand that this fear of failure isn't just a structural bureaucratic issue. It is a deeply ingrained psychological reflex. It brings us to the psychological concept of cognitive dissonance and what behavioral economists call the ostrich effect.
The ostrich effect, like
Yeah.
sticking your head in the sand.
Exactly. When humans encounter a new technology, a bizarre new trend, or a shifting reality that threatens our current understanding of the world, or worse, threatens our sense of identity and expertise, we experience intense cognitive dissonance.
It literally hurts to think about.
It literally causes mental distress. To ease that discomfort, our brain's defense mechanism is to bury our heads in the sand. We dismiss the new threat as a fleeting fad. We mock it. We become cynical.
Think about how the traditional print media arrogantly mocked social media back in, 2012.
Or how many legacy institutions currently mock Web 3.0, or the massive disruptions coming from generative AI.
It's just a toy. It's not going to replace real work.
Right. When faced with bizarre, threatening behavior, the natural instinct is to lean away. But as the framework bluntly notes, an ostrich with its head in the sand is in the perfect position to get eaten.
That is a brilliant way to put it.
You must train yourself to lean into bizarre behavior, because that is where the future is hiding.
Okay, but let's be practical for a second.
Yeah.
If I go into work tomorrow and tell my team, hey, everyone, we need to fail 10 times more often starting today, they are going to panic.
They absolutely will.
So how do we fail efficiently without just, you know, blindly setting cash on fire and burning the company to the ground? How do we embrace risk safely?
Well, here's where it gets really interesting. The material provides a highly actionable, structured framework for exactly this, known as the pre-mortem method.
Pre-mortem. Okay, so we all know what a post-mortem is. It's what doctors do to find out exactly why a patient died or what companies do after a product launch fails miserably.
Right, but a pre-mortem is an analytical exercise you conduct before you launch a project, specifically designed to prevent it from dying.
Oh, that's smart.
To fail efficiently, to take calculated risks instead of blind ones, you have to force the team to ask one crucial, highly uncomfortable question. Why is this a bad idea?
Which is the exact opposite of the energy in a normal corporate pitch meeting.
Completely the opposite.
Usually, a team spends 3 months building a beautiful slide deck explaining exactly why their idea is sheer genius, how it's going to capture 20% market share, and why everyone is going to get a massive bonus. The momentum is infectious.
Right.
Nobody in that room wants to be the cynical downer who raises their hand and says, actually, I think this might blow up in our faces.
Exactly. Corporate culture inherently seeks validation and consensus, not critical vulnerability. The pre-mortem artificially forces vulnerability. The author shares a brilliant story about applying this to their own rapidly growing podcast business.
Yeah, the podcast network story.
They had a grand, ambitious idea to launch a massive podcast network. They were going to acquire a dozen other shows, build out huge new studios, and dominate the space. Everyone on the executive team was thrilled. The momentum was unstoppable.
It sounded like a guaranteed win.
It did. But right before signing the contracts, they paused and forced a pre-mortem. They sat down and asked, let's imagine it is 12 months from now, and this network idea has been an absolute catastrophic failure. Why did it fail?
And what happened?
By giving the team permission to be critical, the blind spot suddenly became glaringly obvious. They realized that managing a dozen mediocre shows would stretch their operational focus to the breaking point. It would cannibalize the marketing attention of their core team.
And distract them from their main show.
Exactly. It would distract them from their flagship, highly profitable primary podcast. Within an hour of starting the pre-mortem, the excitement evaporated and they unanimously voted to kill the project.
Wow.
And here's the punchline. By killing that good idea and maintaining singular focus, their core business grew by 900% in audience size the very next year.
900%.
Prevention is vastly cheaper than cure. You must aggressively confront the worst-case scenarios before you invest your precious focus and capital.
That is such a powerful tool. Just asking, why is this a bad idea?
Yeah.
Gives everyone psychological permission to speak the truth without looking like a buzzkill.
It depersonalizes the critique.
Right. But here is the catch. A pre-mortem only works if you have a room full of people who actually feel psychologically safe enough to challenge the boss. You cannot have a high failure rate or run honest pre-mortems if your team culture is deeply toxic.
No, you can't. If people are afraid of retribution, they will lie to you during the pre-mortem.
Exactly. And that bridges us to the next massive pillar of this deep dive. Culture, the contagion of bad apples, and the obsession with 1% details. Because building a billion-dollar brand requires a resilient team, and protecting that team requires ruthless, unsentimental vigilance.
It does. We need to completely redefine what culture actually means. Culture is not the ping pong table in the break room, it is not the free snacks, and it is certainly not the meaningless core values printed on a poster in the hallway.
Thank goodness, I hate those posters.
We all do. Culture is the strict standard of behavior you are willing to tolerate. The material introduces a brutally simple, highly effective framework for evaluating talent and actively managing culture called the 3 bars.
Okay, the 3 bars, break it down.
When you are evaluating an employee or a potential hire, you have to ask yourself a holistic question. If every single person in this organization possessed the exact same cultural values, the exact same attitude, and the exact same level of output as this person, would the overall bar of the company be raised, maintained, or lowered?
Bar raiser, bar maintainer, bar lowerer. It forces you to look beyond just their sales numbers and look at their cultural impact.
Exactly. The action plan is clear. Bar raisers are the biological engines of your company. You must promote them, pay them disproportionately, and give them autonomy. Bar maintainers are the reliable, steady backbone. You train them, support them, and help them develop.
And the bar lowers.
The framework is absolutely unequivocal on this point. You must remove them immediately. You cannot coach them out of it. You cannot hope they improve. You must amputate.
Amputate. That is a strong word.
It has to be. This harsh reality is based on the devastating psychological contagion of the bad apple.
There is a quote from Oprah Winfrey that the author uses to perfectly encapsulate this. She said, "A bad apple can ruin the barrel, but it's important to remember that the barrel can be cleaned." It implies that toxicity isn't just an isolated problem. It spreads like a virus.
It is highly contagious on a neurological level. The text cites extensive organizational psychology research demonstrating that when a bad apple, an individual who is chronically cynical, deeply toxic, or consistently evades responsibility is allowed to remain on a team, it initiates a rapid cascade of physiological and psychological degradation in everyone around them.
So it's not just that they are doing bad work.
No, it isn't just that the bad apple does poor work. It is that their presence actively suppresses the bar raisers. It leads to widespread emotional disengagement, heightened anxiety, social withdrawal.
And then the good people start leaving.
Or worse, the bar maintainers begin copying the toxic behavior because they see it goes unpunished. The researchers arrived at a vital, sobering conclusion. One exceptional person leaving a good company rarely kills the organization, but one truly toxic person allowed to stay absolutely can destroy it from the inside out.
That is a heavy reality for any manager to sit with. Tolerating a toxic high performer is actually an act of sabotage against the rest of your team.
Yes, it is.
So that is the defensive strategy for culture. Aggressively clean the barrel. But how do you build culture offensively? How do you create an environment that naturally produces excellence? The framework points to a concept that sounds trivial, but is actually the secret weapon of the world's best companies: the law of sweating the small stuff.
The author makes a compelling argument that true industry-defining innovation is rarely born from cinematic eureka moments or singular strokes of solitary genius.
Which is how movies portray it.
Right, the lone genius.
Yeah.
But in reality, it is almost always born from relentless, persistent teams who are pathologically obsessed with compounding 1% gains. If a culture does not care about the microscopic, seemingly insignificant details, it will inevitably produce mediocre work. Because greatness is simply the culmination of thousands of tiny, perfectly executed details.
There are two incredible examples of this in the material that I want to dissect because they show how this applies to both internal team motivation and external consumer psychology.
Let's hear them.
The first example is about rehumanizing the daily grind. In our modern digital economy, it is dangerously easy to become entirely detached from the reality of our work. You stare at a dashboard all day and you just see abstract numbers. 1 million impressions, 10,000 downloads, 5,000 transactions.
It just becomes a video game.
Exactly. The human brain cannot emotionally process those numbers. It dehumanizes the impact of the team's effort, which leads to apathy. So to combat this, the author created a specific internal communication channel dedicated entirely to sharing real-world visceral stories of how the team's abstract digital work impacted actual, breathing human lives.
They named it the Impact Channel. And the psychological utility of this is brilliant. It ensured that every single team member, whether they were an introverted data engineer writing code or an extroverted salesperson, viscerally felt the profound emotional meaning behind the metrics on their screen.
It gives the work a soul.
It actively prevented the emotional detachment that inevitably leads to sloppy, uninspired work. When you know, without a shadow of a doubt, that the code you are writing or the marketing copy you are drafting is going to touch a real human life, you inherently start sweating the small stuff. You care about the 1% details because the work has meaning.
That is how you build an internal culture of excellence.
Mm.
But the second example blew my mind because it demonstrates how obsessing over the 1% details allows you to literally hack consumer psychology.
Ah, the Apple Store.
Yes, the story of the Apple Store. If you go into an Apple Store and sign up for one of their one-to-one instructional workshops, the employees are rigorously trained with one unbreakable rule. They must never, under any circumstances, touch the customer's computer or device without explicitly asking for permission first.
On the surface, that just seems like basic, polite customer service.
Right. But the framework reveals it is a highly calculated, deeply manipulative psychological maneuver.
It is entirely calculated, engineered by retail psychologists. By verbally refusing to take control of the machine and forcing the customer to physically navigate the interface themselves, Apple is evoking two incredibly powerful subconscious cognitive biases.
What's the first one?
The first is the mere exposure effect. Psychological studies consistently show that the more frequently humans are exposed to a stimulus in this case, navigating the MacOS interface, the more fondly they view it. By making the customer drive, they are artificially increasing exposure and building familiarity.
Okay, that makes sense. And the second bias.
The second bias, which is vastly more powerful, is the endowment effect. Human evolutionary psychology dictates that we assign significantly higher emotional and financial value to objects that we feel we own or physically possess.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. By forcing the customer to physically hold the iPad or rest their hands on the MacBook keyboard, it creates a subconscious, tactile sense of ownership. Their brain begins to value the product as theirs before they've even swiped their credit card.
That is wild.
Yeah.
That is the staggering power of a 1% detail. It isn't an accident. It is the weaponization of human psychology.
Exactly.
So, to synthesize this for anyone listening who is currently trying to build a startup or lead a corporate department or just run a local community group, culture is not what you write on a whiteboard. Culture is the exact standard of the worst behavior you are passively willing to tolerate. Those are your bar lowers.
Yeah.
And true excellence is the collective pathological obsession with the microscopic 1% details that eventually compound into an insurmountable competitive advantage.
Precisely. If you protect the barrel and sweat the details, the macro-level success takes care of itself.
Okay, we have covered an immense amount of ground, and we have climbed incredibly high up the architecture of success today. We've gone from identifying the sequential necessity of filling the 5 buckets of potential knowledge, skills, network, resources, reputation. We've unpacked the biological hack of acquiring skills rapidly by leveraging loss aversion and creating a public obligation to teach. We navigated the deeply uncomfortable reality that your hard-won skills are worthless unless you actively place them in a highly leveraged context where they are perceived as rare.
A very tough pill to swallow.
And we learned that the only way to innovate is to outfail your rivals by crushing the disease of bureaucracy, utilizing the pre-mortem to ask, why is this a bad idea? And we just explored how to fiercely protect your culture by amputating bad apples and obsessing over the 1% psychological detail.
It's a very comprehensive roadmap.
It is. But if we pull the camera all the way back, zooming out from the boardroom and the strategy sessions, there is one final, ultimate, unseen foundation holding this entire massive structure up. If this layer fails, the entire framework collapses instantly.
Yes. Law 9 in the text presents the most fundamental truth of all. Always, without exception, prioritize your first foundation. And that foundation is your biological health.
It is so easy, almost incredibly common, to completely overlook this when we are in the thick of the grind.
Oh, we all do it.
When you are desperately trying to fill your resource and reputation buckets, when you are terrified of a professional earthquake, sleep feels like a luxury. Exercise feels like a distraction.
But the text references a haunting quote by the 19th century statesman Edward Stanley that I genuinely believe everyone needs to write on their bathroom mirror.
What's the quote?
Those who think they have no time for bodily exercise will sooner or later have to find time for illness.
Oof, that is powerful.
It is an absolute, unavoidable biological reality. You cannot pour energy, creativity, or leadership from an empty physical bucket. The author emphasizes that taking care of your physiological machinery, your sleep, your nutrition, your cardiovascular health isn't just a holistic lifestyle choice or a nice to have. It is a hard professional prerequisite.
Because your body is the only vehicle you get to own in this life.
Exactly. It is the singular vessel you will ever use to explore the world, to endure the stress of building businesses, to execute your skills, and to experience the joy of your relationships.
And if that foundational bedrock cracks, everything built on top of it, your carefully curated reputation, your amassed financial resources, your powerful network, and even your cognitive ability to deploy your knowledge instantly collapses.
A billionaire in a hospital bed with failing health only has one dream.
And that brings the entire deep dive full circle. It doesn't matter if you have perfectly optimized your loss aversion or if you found the perfect $8 million context for your rare skills. If your biological bucket has a hole in it, all the brilliant strategic frameworks in the world will not keep your professional or personal life afloat. Health isn't a separate category from business. It is the operating system that runs the business.
It is the ultimate prerequisite for greatness. Without the physical stamina to endure the friction of failure, you simply cannot succeed.
This has been an absolutely unbelievable, dense journey through the true architecture of success. We have systematically stripped away the superficial, shiny advice that clutters our social media feeds and looked directly at the psychological and structural mechanics of what actually works over the span of a lifetime.
It really challenges a lot of our modern
It
assumptions.
does. We've learned that you must resist the ego and fill your buckets in the right, boring order. Knowledge and skills first, always, because they are the only assets that will survive the inevitable professional earthquake.
Right.
We've learned that if you want to master something quickly, you cannot hide in the shadows. You have to step into the stadium, create a public obligation to teach it, and put your social skin in the game. We discovered the shocking economic reality that your skills are intrinsically worthless outside of the right room, and that you must stop trying to fix all your weaknesses and instead lean heavily into your asymmetrical strengths.
A huge mindset shift.
Huge. We saw exactly why you have to relentlessly outfail your rivals by killing corporate bureaucracy and forcing your team into vulnerability with the premortem method. We explore the contagion of bad apples, the necessity of amputating them from your barrel, and why hacking consumer psychology requires an obsession with the 1% details.
And finally, we grounded it all in health.
Right, the undeniable reality that none of this matters if you do not aggressively safeguard your ultimate foundation, your physical and mental health.
It is a profound, comprehensive blueprint, not just for building a resilient business, but for architecting a highly resilient, anti-fragile life. But before we wrap up today, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final, highly specific scenario to mentally chew on.
Okay, lay it on us.
It is a thought experiment that builds on every single concept we have dissected today. I want you to imagine that you wake up tomorrow morning, you check your phone, and a massive, catastrophic, professional earthquake has struck.
The worst case scenario.
Yes. Your specific industry has been entirely wiped out by a new AI model overnight. Your job title is completely obsolete. A simultaneous market crash has drained your investment accounts and your savings to zero. The powerful network you thought you had has scattered, and your public reputation has been unfairly destroyed.
A total, absolute reset. Ground zero.
A total reset. You are sitting at your kitchen table with absolutely nothing in your third, fourth, or fifth buckets. Your network, resources, and reputation are gone. Looking only at the knowledge and skills buckets you physically possess in your brain right this very second, what exactly are you capable of building tomorrow morning?
Wow.
How will you deploy what you uniquely know to start rapidly refilling the other three buckets? Because action creates evidence, and evidence is the only thing that changes belief. If you sit with that hypothetical scenario and you do not like an answer to that question, or you realize your first two buckets are alarmingly empty, you know exactly which bucket you need to start filling the moment this deep dive ends.